she was going all by herself in the big wide world. Gerda perfectly well understood all by herself what the words meant, and she told her crow the story and asked if it had seen Kay. And nodding very thoughtfully, the crow said, "I may have done. I may have done." "What have you?" cried the little girl, nearly squeezing the crow to death as she kissed it. Go easy, said the crow. "I think it may be little Kay, but I rather think he's forgotten you for now, Princess." "Does he live with the princess?" asked Gerda. "Why, yes," said the crow, "but it's such hard work talking your language. If you can understand crow's jabber, I'll be able to tell you." "No, I've never learned it," said Gerda. "My granny could, and she knew the language. I only wish I'd learned." "Doesn't matter," said the crow. "I'll tell you as well as I can, but it's bound to be bad." And it told her what it knew. In the kingdom where we are now lives a princess who's tremendously clever, but then she's read all the newspapers in the world and forgotten them again. She's so clever. She was sitting on the throne the other day, and they say there isn't much fun in that, when she happened to hum a song, the one that goes, "Why shouldn't I get married?" "I say, there's something in that," she said, and so she decided she would get married. But she wanted a husband who knew how to answer when spoken to, one who wouldn't just stand looking genteel, because that's such a bore. She had all the ladies in waiting called together, and when they heard what she'd wanted, they were thoroughly delighted. "Now, that's what I like, and I was thinking so only the other day," they said. "It's true, every word I say," said the crow. "I have a tame sweetheart who's free to walk around the palace, and she told me." Of course, his sweetheart was another crow, for birds of a feather flock together, and crows will be crows. The newspaper at once came out with an etching of hearts and the princess's monogram. They said that any good-looking young man was at liberty to come to the palace and talk to the princess, and the one who talked as though he was at home there and talked best would be chosen by the princess for husband. "Oh yes," said the crow, "you can take it from me. It's as true as I'm standing here." People flocked to the palace. You've never seen such a crowd and a commotion, but nobody succeeded either the first day or the second. They all knew how to talk while they were in the street, but when they entered the palace gates and saw the guard in silver and the footman standing all the way up the stairs in gold and the big lighted halls, they were bewildered. And standing in front of the throne where the princess sat, all they could say was the last word she had said, and she had no wish to hear that again. In there it was as though people had swallowed snuff and fallen into a trance till they got into the street again. They could talk then all right. There was a queue stretching right from the city gates to the palace. "I went in to have a look," said the crow. "They grew both hungry and thirsty, but nobody at the palace gave them as much as a glass of warm water. Some of the wisest, to be sure, had taken sandwiches with them, but they didn't share them with their neighbours. They thought to themselves, 'Let him look hungry, and then the princess won't have him.'" "But Kay, little Kay," asked Gerda, "when did he come? Was he among the crowd?" Hold hard, we're coming to him." It was on the third day that a little person without a horse or a carriage came cheerfully marching straight up to the palace. His eyes houses were brightly lit. Privy councillors and excellencies were walking around barefooted, carrying golden dishes. It was enough to make anyone feel solemn. His boots creaked ever so loudly, but he didn't get frightened. Not he. "That's Kay all right," said Gerda. "I knew he had new boots. I heard them creaking. Granny's parlour." "Well, they certainly creaked," said the Crow, and as cheerful as anything he made straight for the Princess, who sat on a pearl as big as a spinning wheel, and all the ladies in waiting, with their maids and their maids' maids, and all the gentlemen in waiting, with their servants and servants' servants, were drawn up all around, looking prouder and prouder the nearer they were to the door. The servants' pages, who always wear slippers, will hardly bear looking at it. They stand so proudly in the doorway. "That must be dreadful," said little Gerda, and yet Kay won the Princess. "If I had not been a crow, I'd have had her, engaged or not engaged." He talked as well as I talked when I jabbered crow talk, so my tame sweetheart said. He was bright and cheerful. He hadn't come to propose, only to hear the Princess's wisdom, and he thought it good, while she in turn thought him good. "Why, of course it was Kay," said Gerda. "He was so clever. He could do mental arithmetic with fractions. Oh, please will you take me to the palace?" "It's easy to talk," said the Crow, "but how do we do it?" "I'll speak to my tame sweetheart about it. I dare say she can advise us. I may as well tell you that a little girl like you will never be properly admitted." "Oh, yes, I will," said Gerda. "When Kay hears I'm there, he'll come straight out and fetch me." "Wait for me at that stile," said the Crow, and wagging its head, he flew off. It had grown dark by the time the Crow returned. "Rah, rah," it said. "She sends you all her love, and here's a small loaf for you. She took it in the kitchen. There's plenty of bread, and I expect you're hungry. There's no chance of your getting into the palace. You're in bare feet. The guard in silver and the footman in gold won't allow it. But don't cry. You'll get there. My sweetheart knows a little back staircase which leads to the bedchamber, and she knows where to get the key." And so they went into the garden, along the big avenue where leaf fell after leaf, and when the palace lights were out one by one, the Crow took little Gerda to its back door, which stood ajar. Oh, how Gerda's heart throbbed with fear and longing. It was as though she was about to do something wrong, while all she wanted to know was whether it was little Kay. Why, it must be. She could really see him smile, as he had done when they had sat at home under the roses. He would surely be glad to see her, and hear what a long way she had walked for his sake, and learn how sad they had all been at home when he hadn't returned. Oh, how fearful and how joyful she was. It was hung with rose-coloured satin on which were artificial flowers. Here dreams were already sweeping past them, but so fast they did go that Goethe never caught sight of the noble people. Each room was more gorgeous than the one before. It was enough to astonish anyone. And now, at last, they were in the bedchamber. The ceiling there resembled a large palm with leaves of glass, precious glass, and hanging from a thick stem of gold in the middle of the floor were two beds which looked like lilies. One of them was white, and in this one lay the princess. The other was red, and this was where she expected to find Kay. Bending aside one of the red leaves, she saw a brown neck. Yes, it was Kay. She called his name out aloud and held the lamp toward him. The dreams came sweeping back on their horses. He awoke, turned his head, and it wasn't little Kay. The prince resembled him only in the neck, but he was young and handsome. And looking out from the white lily bed, the princess asked what was the matter. And little Gerda wept and told her story and what the crows had done for her. "You poor thing," said the prince and the princess, and they praised the crows, saying they were not at all angry, although they weren't to go on doing that sort of thing, but they should have a reward. "Would you both like to fly away?" asked the princess, "or would you like to have a permanent appointment as court crows with anything that comes?" And both crows curtsied and asked for a permanent appointment, for they thought of their old age, and that one day it was a good thing to have something for a rainy day, as they put it. And the prince got up from his bed and allowed Gerda to sleep in it. It was the most he could do. Folding her little hands, she thought, how good they are, human beings and animals. Then she closed her eyes and slept deliciously. All the dreams came flying back again, looking like the angels of God, and pulling a little sledge on which Kay sat nodding. But it was only dreams, and so it had all gone again the moment she woke up. The next day, she was dressed from top to toe in silk and velvet. She was given the chance of staying at the palace and having a good time, but all she asked for was a small carriage with a horse to draw it and a pair of little boots so that she could drive off into the wide world and find Kay. She was given both boots and a muff. She was now beautifully dressed, and when she was ready to leave, a new coach of pure gold stood waiting at the door. The coat of arms of the prince and princess glistened on it like a star. Coachmen, footmen, and postilions, for postilions were there as well, all wore gold crowns. The prince and princess themselves helped her into the coach and wished her good luck. The wood crow, which had now got married, went with her for the first 12 miles, sitting beside her because it couldn't bear to travel with its back to the horses. The other crow stood in